today I want to talk about choice. It's often said, or I often heard it said, that it's not a choice to have an eating disorder. That is absolutely true. Not a choice to have an eating disorder. In the same way, you don't really get to choose what hair colour you get, or lots of other things. So there's this thing, genetics. God, they make tons of choices that we have no say in, and that's just that, isn't it? You know, like, I didn't get to choose what colour hair I got, and that is not fair, is it? But there's nothing I can do about it. I also didn't get to choose my genetics when it comes to my eating disorder. I did not get to choose that I am predisposed to having an eating disorder if I go into energy deficit. I did not get to choose that, and that's shitty. But I do get to choose recovery. So, having an eating disorder is not a choice, recovery is. Because, unlike my hair colour, my eating disorder genes are only firing when I'm in energy deficit. So therefore, I can choose not to be in energy deficit. And I can choose not to engage in eating disorder behaviours. And I can choose to do the neural rewiring required to undo all of the things that my brain learned with my eating disorders. And so therefore, I can choose to get myself fully recovered. And I did make that choice. And it was bloody difficult. It took me ages to get to making that choice. But finally, thank God, I did make that choice. And look what happened. I got fully recovered. So while I, of course, have a lot of sympathy for people. Oh, Teddy made an appearance. So cute. Of course, I've got a lot of sympathy for people with eating disorders. But I don't have a lot of sympathy, honestly, for people with eating disorders who aren't choosing recovery and are whining about having an eating disorder and are every day getting up and not choosing recovery. I don't have a lot of sympathy for it. And maybe the reason I can take that stance is because I've done it myself and I've been there myself, and I had an eating disorder for years and years and years and years and years and years myself, and I got up every day myself and didn't choose to recover. And so I know that actually is about choices. I know that any of those days when I had an eating disorder, I could have woken up and I could have chosen not to do my compulsive exercise routines and not to restrict and all those things. And I know that every day part of me knew I could have made that choice. That's the real kicker. Part of me knew I'm choosing to do this. Part of me knew I was choosing to put on my trainers and run. And part of me, a big part of me, knew I could choose not to do this if I really, really, really wanted to. Now, of course, the reason that I wasn't choosing not to do it was because I was afraid. Fear is a massively motivating thing, and it's fear that we are dealing with when we're dealing with eating disorder recovery. It's all about fear. And that's kind of why it's so hard, isn't it? Because we're afraid of weight gain. And it's the fear that stops us making the choices that we need to make in order to recover. And so that's what every person has to come to terms with when they're doing eating disorder recovery. But I think it's because having made that choice and then having worked through that fear, I know that it's doable. And I know that for most of us, it's just actually making the decision to recover, making the decision to stop the compulsive movement, making the decision to eat without restriction. All of that's the hard bit. Actually doing it most of the time is relatively enjoyable. And so I just get a little bit frustrated, shall we say, when people with eating disorders play on the whole victim stuff, like the whole woe is me, I can't recover, that sort of thing. Because I know, in the same way you know, it's not actually true. There's no can't involved. You're choosing not to. And that's different. And yes, I get how scary it is. I'm not going to underplay that. It's fucking scary. I get that. But it is your reality that unless you choose to do the thing that you're afraid of, nothing's going to change. You're going to continue to have an eating disorder. And that's sort of the thing that I get frustrated with. It's because You don't like having an eating disorder. You don't want to have an eating disorder. You're miserable with your life. Sure, you've got to choose to do something that you're afraid of, that scares you. But the reality is that whining about it and being like, oh, poor me, I don't want to make this choice, is not going to change things for you. You're still going to have an eating disorder. So you may as well get on with it, because that's the only thing that's going to change it. And I think that sometimes when we're over sympathetic with people and we're like, oh yeah, poor you, yeah, it's not your fault, I know it's really hard, I know it's really scary, and like, oh, it must be so hard to get up and eat every day. When we're overly sympathetic with people, we're not helping them, because the fact that it's hard is just a fact, and the fact that you have to do it if you want to get fully recovered is also a fact. So the quicker we can just sort of like stop going on about how hard and how awful and how poor you it is, and be like, you can do this and you have to do it, so get on and do it. I think that that's more helpful for people. Like, there is no other way out of this. If you want to fully recover from an eating disorder, you have to do the things that you're afraid of. You have to do the things that scare you. And that's going to be the same today and tomorrow and next year and in 10 years' time. And so you're going to have to do it sooner or later. So you might as well just get on and do it. And that's just the stance I take with it. And some people really hate that and call me brutal, and I probably am, but that's what it is.